Okay, so one of the things that we're going to want to do um, as we start getting into Chapter 6, the first thing you're going to need to do is take the server that you built in Chapter 5 and promote it from a server standing alone on a work group to an Active Directory domain controller. So we're here in Hyper-V. I've got my server running up and running. I called it Win 2016 System Center because that's where we're going with this. You'll be working with the Virtual Machine Manager in a little bit after we get some things installed on the inside. So you're going to just go ahead and connect to it. Notice it's got 8 gigs of memory. I can see its CPU usage. I can see its uptime. One of the things that this seems to allow a little better. For some reason, this works better with larger, with giving me larger screen sizes and screen sizes that I can actually resize a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. I've already installed the Hyper-V role, so so far so good there. It has noticed that I do not have an internet connection, so hopefully I won't need anything more on this right now. There's an outage as far as the internet is concerned. If you can see the screen down there, yeah, that's me. So we'll try this. So the first thing you're going to need to do, of course, if you plan to do some of these things ahead of time, say for example, obtain these things and, like I said, grab them, put them in a directory on your host machine, and then share them into your guest OS, you're going to go get the installer for Windows SQL Server 2014. The text says Service Pack 2. I can only find Service Pack 3, but I'm going to assume that works. You're going to need .NET Framework 3.5. This is actually something you can turn on. Something that I decided to turn on .NET Framework 3.5 at the same time that I was setting up the Hyper-V role. So you could go, and it's not actually something you need to download. You can add it as a feature, essentially. So we go add roles and features. You're also going to need the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit for Windows 10. All of those things you can find on Microsoft.com. Follow the instructions. If there's something specific that you need, and if the search terms don't turn up what you want, vary those search terms just a little, and you should be fine. So this is this is the same path I would take for my Active Directory install. So next, and so as you can see, features, roles. Okay, it went through. So what I did here was I chose the Hyper-V role, and then because I knew I was going to need the .NET Framework 3.5, I chose to turn it on as well. So in this case, I'm going to go with Active Directory Domain Services. And it's going to think for a minute. And it's going to do ADAC, all the usual stuff, all the stuff you should remember from your server course. And if you don't, if you still have the server book, and you need to look at that, just review your server materials, because installing Active Directory hasn't changed all that much. So I'm going to go ahead and add the features, add any management tools. It's going to bring the ADAC. ADUC, we're going to need Active Directory users and computers in a little bit when we turn on a special account for the memory manager, the virtual machine manager itself. And of course, snap-ins and command line tools. As with a lot of this stuff, as you install these things, what comes along with it is, oh, and notice, some things have, I've got some new options here now. This ADDS thing wasn't there a minute ago. A lot of these things will bring in new PowerShell options, commandlets, inclusions, etc. So I'm not going to worry about anything else. I don't need certificate services or federation, rights management, lightweight directory services. If you're going to go for sort of a terminal services or virtual desktop infrastructure, you may need remote desktop services or remote access, things like that. But for now, just follow your instructions. And yeah, click that. I don't want Azure Active Directory. Now, one of the options you have here, and yeah, I will let it restart if it needs. Okay, yeah, and install. And I am going to pause here because this is likely to take a while. If it fails because I have no network connectivity, I'll let you know, and I guess I'll do this demo later. If not, I'll just keep rolling. Pay close attention to your hardware requirements. There's a table with the hardware requirements for the various VMM components. Make sure that your virtual machine has enough oomph. I've given this thing 8 gigs of RAM because it's going to be my server and my console and my database server and my library server all at the same time. They don't all have to be the same machine. So I opted for 8 gigs, which is the bare minimum for those 4 roles, for the most intensive of those 4 roles, which is the database server. Of course, that doesn't give me a lot of room left over for supporting virtual machines, so I might have to bump it up. You might also have to add a virtual hard drive or two to this system at some point. And speaking of which, let me look at my settings right quick, because I cannot remember whether I added another VHD, and I have not. Your database server wants 50 gigs of space minimum. So one thing I might have to do here is add another virtual hard drive. Actually, you know what? Hold on, I think I actually did this. Hold on, let me check. I could have sworn that I did this. Maybe I just haven't pointed it correctly yet. So, virtual hard disks. Yeah, I did. So I need to add that hard disk back because it has gone missing. You know what? I'm going to get it. I'm at a new. Let's make this a new controller. Add. Yes. Browse. Open. Apply. Okay. Now, that might not show up just yet. So actually I can try my disk management utilities. And I'll pause it here. Oh, it's coming back. It's doing a lot. It's a bit slow right now. Okay, so it's back. I'm going to go ahead and do this while it is still thinking about loading this Active Directory. Okay, close. Okay, it worked. Good. So go ahead, initialize this drive. bring it online. Notice that I didn't have to shut the VM down at all. I think this thing is a good deal more tolerant, shall we say, of this sort of thing than, say, and honestly, adding a SCSI drive to VMware Workstation will require you to shut the workstation, the VM down. Adding a SATA or NVMe may work a little better. But we're talking about a system which is more or less designed to be adaptable. I'm just going to call it, let's call it database. That's yeah, database. It might not be the only thing we use this for, but it's kind of a reminder of where this is going. So that if as I'm installing other things like the SQL Server and such, if it needs a big empty space, I can hand it drive E and call it good. Now, of course, if I run into a problem with that, well then I guess I will just add more hard drives. It's really easy when all the hard drives are files. So what I'm going to do now, close this down, and it's got some things for me to do. Okay, so I'm going to pause this here because the next video is going to be that promotion. I need to promote this thing, probably reboot it just for safety's sake. At this point, follow your instructions. You can use the Superior Technical College domain name in your instructions, even if you're doing this in the real world. In fact, I would suggest it, because just in case you're on a domain name, like for example, this guest system belongs to the TSTC domain. I don't want to accidentally create a TSTC domain inside the TSTC domain. I don't think I would accidentally leave my sandbox, but if I were to leave my sandbox, suddenly there's a domain controller where one shouldn't be. So it is all right to use a bogus domain like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll be right back.